Okay, is this working? It's day one, or log one, of the project known as Revival. I was told to keep this stupid video diary, so hi. This is so incredibly stupid. Log 6. 3 subjects showing sign of decay. It looks like they're trying to attack each other through their cages. It's like their brains are hardwired. They're not focused on anything else. It needs more data. Okay, I don't know how much time I have. The subjects of Project Revival aren't subjects anymore. If they touch you, it's the end. Do not let them get close. It's just me now. If anyone finds this, run.
So this is where our story starts. It's a story of a man as regular as you watching it. It had been a few days since the virus had taken over the city that we all called home. And with no one left from a past life, it was really just time to move on, to create something, and more importantly, to realize what happened. After picking up all the possessions I had, it was time to fight through the zombies that were at the bottom of the building, and head for the street to try and scavenge what I could from the city. I started day 2 awakening on top of a rooftop. I quickly realized with my supreme intelligence that it was actually probably the safest place to sleep with what was going on below me. I wanted to start the day gathering the basic Minecraft resources, just like everybody else did, but at the same time wanting to spend these days exploring what was left of my once home. After grabbing just a little bit of regular oak wood, I found what was once the underground railway system, and which was now completely flooded. And after grabbing some iron blocks near the entrance, I was able to create myself iron tools and a little bit of iron armor. I spent the next few days exploring abandoned buildings, really finding nothing except food, which came when I came across a general store on day 4, and I got lucky finding a lot more food than I had anticipated. This was a huge win, and definitely a huge morale boost. Daylight broke on day 5, and I already had a deer in the back of my head. I didn't know where I wanted to go from my home to create something new. It was that for so many years, and leaving just gave me a twinge of regret, even in a situation like mine. I decided though that the best course of action was to just pick a direction, and for that, I headed to the post-attack zone of the city. I headed up to the tallest building to get a better view of the world below me. It was a ruined city, but I decided that my best course of action was to head inwards towards the beach. From there I could create a boat and go find safety, so that's exactly what I did. That task that I wanted, it was definitely easier said than done. I headed down from the tall building after spending the night, and once I got close, I saw it. It was a horde like I had never seen, and I instantly froze up. But I needed to get to that beach. It was a new part of my adventure. My best bet here was to stay up on the roof of the buildings. Luckily, it was the one advantage that I had over the zombies. Unsurprisingly, I was actually just back to where I started, locking myself away, barricading the doors and windows, and hiding, just waiting for the sun to rise so I can finally start to make a move. Once again, this task was proving harder than I had originally anticipated. My plan was really just to hold out in my home until the sun rose, because zombies and sun would usually equal in a result, giving me a clear path to the beach. But they didn't burn in the sun. They must have evolved somehow, adapted, or I don't know, but the bow I had collected was doing nothing to the horde below me. It left me with only one choice, just to make a run for the beach. So I made myself a boat, and that's exactly what I did. And off I went on search of new land. It took a day of traveling along the beautiful ocean, but I finally found land. The mountainous area around me, it wasn't my home just yet, and there was still no place for me to even think about settling down to. I felt like I'd walked forever. Honestly, up and down mountains, left to right the mountains, just everything with mountains. But after that, I finally found something. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but it was actually a research station that was abandoned. With the weather up here getting worse than I was actually comfortable with, and with it snowing more than I would have liked, I headed down into the research station and blocked myself into the abandoned bedroom, and off I went to sleep. I had started day 10 prepared and ready. I broke down the barricades that I had put up overnight and set off into the unknown. It took a bit of time, slaying a few zombies on the way, just to try find land that I wanted to make my new home. But after searching for probably a very long time, I had finally found an area that I thought could sustain my home, and also my ideas. So I set off to work. Honestly, you're probably looking at it wondering how this house took me 4 days. I mean, this house would have been finished in half the time, but there was really just one thing that I didn't account for in this situation, and it was the pure amount of zombies that would come and attack me and just disrupt the entire work. It just felt like every time I got just a little bit of work started, I was attacked my momentum was ruined, and this was repeated for the entire building process, and it was awful to try and deal with. But after a very long task, the start of my first home was actually finally completed. I wasn't too happy with it, and it was definitely tiny, but it will do for now. It was the start of day 16, and something I hadn't counted on was the fact that with just a house, I was more prone to attacks than I ever had been before. I had to defend myself, and I decided to just spend day 16 creating what was a small barricade around the front of my house. This proved a very good idea, as even when I was building the barricade, a horde of zombies decided to come and interrupt my progress. This was going to prove more difficult than I had originally anticipated, and I was really worried for the future of this series. Day 17 to 19 were more stressful than I originally anticipated. I wanted to, and I did, just start to create a mine. It was definitely a much bigger task than I thought to get armor, and also resources that I didn't have. It was a scary task, having to succumb to the darkness of the mine I was creating. Being attacked every few blocks I dug down, it was definitely proving a harder task than I originally thought. I think this world was so much more difficult not knowing what lurked around every corner. Day 21 was an adventure. I found out on day 21 that I wasn't absolutely alone in this world. I mean, I was still focusing on creating my mine, but after my iron pickaxe had broken, it was time to head to the surface just to create a new one. That's when I found the chest and also the book. To summarize, the book claimed that I was being watched, and for being on their land, as they called it, I had to pay items and leave it in the chest. It sounded stupid, pointless, and really just an empty threat. If anyone wanted something from me, they could just come get it directly. Day 22 arrived, and honestly, I really wasn't happy about being threatened. Looking back to day 1, I had lost my home, my family, and everything else that came with it. I mean, I started the day by creating myself a Spartan weapon and also a Spartan shield. I decided, after extensive research, to create myself what was called an iron mace, something that actually dealt extra damage to undead creatures, which would make zombie killing definitely a lot easier. And off I went on my journey to find whoever did this. Day 23, and I think I found what was once somebody's home. By the time I parked up my boat and got myself past the creatures of the night, I realized there was nothing left. It was another place that had been taken over. I fought my way through the best I could, but ended up staying the night in an abandoned building before deciding to move on. I wasn't sure if this island was the people who sent the note, but I really did plan on finding out. My adventures, however, they led to nothing. I found no trail, I found no sign, I found nothing that would prove who did this. I could only assume that it was due to them not wanting to be found. I arrived back home on the night of day 25, and after grabbing myself a companion, who I decided to call Jumpy the Second, it was time for a well-deserved rest. Day 26 to 28, and the zombies around me were expanding at a huge rate. This was obviously much faster than I originally had anticipated that they would. The thing I was worried about more than anything in this situation was definitely food. The mobs that were around me were in fewer numbers than I thought, that in pigs or sheep or cows or chickens. So I used the next few days to terraform the surrounding area around my house and to make the start of my potato farm. Somewhere that I knew would at least keep me safe if the food supply that I had was ever to calm down in the coming days. It was going to be a long task, but I was definitely looking forward to it. Day 29, and it was time to start the huge new project that I was really looking forward to doing. I wanted to create myself a compound type of thing, somewhere that it could give me the freedom to move around without worry of being attacked, and definitely just to give me the space that I needed. I was definitely worried about being attacked, or even worse, turning into one of them. I started the day clearing out the land and mining all of the trees around me. Spruce wood would make for a perfect defensive fence line. This was going to be amazing. Right, my thought process here. I need to get these walls up as quickly as physically kind of possible, but at the same time I don't know if I've given myself enough room. Okay, there we go. Right, I think what we do, maybe like a little enchanting like hut here, and then we move the farm, because the farm's kind of in the way. I can make this whole side here the farm and then keep the house just directly in the middle. Right, I need to do that, but what I need to do first is fill in all this, otherwise I am definitely going to die. It was straight into the mine for day 33. Throughout this entire series, I literally hadn't found one diamond. And yet we were a third of the way into it so far. It took a little while to get going, but luckily I managed to find myself 8 diamonds to start off the trip. And after more mining and searching the area around me, I came across some more diamonds, which was fantastic. And well, then this happened. Oh my god. Yo, what are you? Just had a panic attack. It was the start of day 36, and I was really happy with what I had collected during this mining expedition. I mean, apart from seeing the demon. I decided to make myself a brand new diamond mace, and a diamond pickaxe to go along with it with what I had collected. I decided to spend the rest of the day back down in the mine, finding some lava so I could collect 17 pieces of obsidian, which took a very long time. So I could create a nether portal and also an enchanting table for the new enchanting station, which was an idea I had that we'd probably do later. Day 37 and also day 38. I spent 2 days creating myself an enchanting hut. After I made my enchanting table, I had the idea to put it on stilts. So if my defenses ever were compromised and zombies did break into the compound, I had a high place to put myself. It took a lot of spruce wood, a lot of killing zombies, and it was also me creating something that I was actually quite happy with. I spent the days after the creation enchanting my gear and creating all the bookshelves that I needed before spending day 38 fixing and also creating what was left of the enchanting hut. It was starting to come along, my own little community. Who would have thought in a zombie-ridden world? With the excess of zombies that were spawning around the edge of my compound, and what looked like them not only just rising in size, but also strength, I slowly realized that outside the edge of my compound, I had just had a walking EXP farm with infinite experience. If I could force these zombies into a confined area, I could make it so I could have infinite experience. So that's exactly what I did. I created a small gap in my compound and a nice little 2x2 with enough space for them to fall into, and for me to grab myself some experience without having to do anything but sit there on AFK. This would make getting level 30 a really easy task, meaning I could have infinite sets of gear ready for any situation. Day 43 to 47. I finally decided that enough was enough on the start of day 43. I now had the tools, the gear, the weapons, and the confidence to go find whoever thought I was on their land. I really couldn't find anything beforehand, so I started just by going the complete opposite direction to where I went 20 days ago. After a while of searching, I came across what looked like a city that was just about to be taken over. I could see villagers hiding in their homes, running from their life from the hordes that were outside, and I decided to wait in the nearby lighthouse until nightfall to make my move. And just like that, I was instantly overwhelmed by the amount of zombies that had either turned or taken over this small town. But in that moment, I didn't care. I was in control. I took it upon myself to realize that these were the people sending me the messages, and I burnt their town to the ground with no remorse. And I headed home. I spent day 48 trying to center myself after what I had done. I was home, but could I have saved those villagers from any further pain? At the same time, I never felt more alone in these entire days. Did I do the right thing? Could I have saved the small town? They came at me first. It was a difficult choice. I just need time. I decided on day 51 after a very short break that the best thing I could do is to set up a security camera, or just a few of them at least. I didn't know who was out there in the wild, especially with what had just happened. I didn't want to take any unnecessary risks. It took a day or two to get the materials that I needed to actually be able to create 2 cameras, and also a monitor so I could be able to watch the cameras wherever I was in the world. And it came to the end of day 53, and I finally had the resources that I needed. I put up 2 external cameras on separate sides of the compound and really just enjoyed playing around with the features of it. I mean, it felt good to have this extra layer of protection. And also, just to have a little bit of fun. I think it was sorely missing. Right, I want to test something, because this isn't as efficient as it could be. They keep getting stuck behind the side, and I don't know how to... I want them to come around this way, so I might check out, because... Okay, I'm gonna have to fix this. And just like that, it was time to make a much more efficient grinder. The one I had made in the previous days, it was serving its purpose, but not to its fullest potential like I would have wanted. I spent 2 days creating a grinder what I was proud of, and also that the zombies didn't have to go around, but instead inside of the walls. It was proving a lot of work to do, but at the same time, the payoff of having consistent level 30 enchants was definitely something that was going to be worth it later on. I think it paid off instantly. You know, the amount of work that you put into something is how much it will give back to you, I guess. Another day, and yet another adventure. Over the course of this 58-day journey so far, I had managed to collect guns from various bandits around the world. But with that came no ammunition. It was 2 bullets to a gun, and it wasn't viable to defend myself. So with that in mind, I decided it was time to take another trip to where this all started, to see if there were any guns or ammunition that I could collect to protect me on this journey that I was having. After a while, I found myself in a completely new area of the city I had once known, and headed over the huge bridge in front of me to try find what I wanted, and surprisingly, It actually paid off. I was lucky enough to, while searching abandoned houses, after searching for what felt like forever, and in it I found myself 2 guns that I could put to use. I spent the next few days after this win using my new weapons to defend myself throughout the city. It was so much easier than it was before. I also spent some time collecting some iron blocks so that when I needed it, I didn't have to venture into the mine anymore. After arriving home on day 63, I realized I was more of an idiot than I originally thought. I slowly realized once I got back to my house that I had accidentally thrown out my bed at some point. It was my goal during this series not to have to endure the night at any cost. I simply wouldn't survive it with the amount of zombies that were starting to appear, but into the night I went, killing every spider in sight. My goal was to just find enough string to make a bed. Day 64 was a few things, but it really was not exciting content. It wasn't dangerous, it wasn't eye-watering, it was simple. I returned home in the morning of day 64 after my string adventure, made myself a bed, but by then it was morning, and I really just wanted to spend the rest of the day doing absolutely nothing. So that's exactly what I did. All seemed peaceful coming into day 65, but like the famous quote says, there's always a calm before the storm. I spent the entire of day 65 starting to organize my chest, because if there's one thing that I'm not, it's organized. However, I made the mistake of checking the security cameras after a little bit of work, just to see what was going on the opposite end of my compound. And the zombies were out in numbers that I had never seen during the day. They looked stronger too, they looked like they'd grown in size. It was a terrifying sight. With the zombies gathering outside, I really didn't feel safe leaving my own compound for the next few days. It was like a fight or flight response, you know, and I wasn't really happy with the latter. Instead, I spent 2 days creating a brand new farm on a different side of the compound. Where the farm was originally, I mean, it hadn't really seen much use. I was just relying on the food that I had got from the city at the start. So I worked on creating something that was fenced off and also secure, just in case something was to ever breach the compound. This also meant the crops couldn't be ruined as easily before by spiders or bandits, and it came out looking a little cozy. It was a little tight, but it definitely did the job. I realized whilst making my farm and how cozy it actually was that it was getting a bit crowded in here. Throughout the entire compound, there really wasn't that much room for anything extra, you know, any expansions, anything I wanted to create in the future. And with that in mind, I decided to explore a dimension I hadn't before, the Nether. My goal was to get enough glowstone in this situation to light up the surrounding area enough that I could have peace of mind while starting to upgrade the compound. But I really wasn't expecting what came next. After I got to the Nether, I wasn't where I thought I'd be. I ended up spawning inside of what was actually a research station. Something that after looking around had been completely abandoned. Was this where the virus had originated? It was something that was in the back of my head, you know? I still had the goal of getting my glowstone, but this stayed at the back of my mind. I hadn't thought about it for a very long time. But was I currently in the vicinity of Patient Zero? There were so many zombies infected in this area, whether it be pig zombies or normal zombies, and I couldn't help but think that these were people I once knew. But I did what I came to do. You know, I came in, I collected my glowstone, and with the thought at the back of my head, I realized the adventure had only just begun. I had finally completed the goal of collecting the glowstone that I wanted for this expansion of the compound. But after I headed back to the research station and went back through the portal, I wasn't actually home. I was underwater, and panic instantly set in. My survival instincts were going crazy. Quickly looking around for somewhere to get air, it looked like it was an experiment. The portal seemed to be in the center of a problem. Swimming through for my life, I managed to find many offices that I didn't even know existed, and there was nothing to salvage. Everything was flooded, underwater, and ruined. It took a while to swim through, but I finally managed to get back to the surface. What the hell had just happened? Day 74, and I decided to explore the area around me. It was an island that I was actually completely unfamiliar with, and it looked like the Nether portal was the key of it, but what was it the key of? It looked like this was once a variety of research stations, and from what I could tell, this was the beginning. And the flood that I saw earlier was purely a safety mechanism for when things went wrong, e.g. the Nether portal, something happened, I don't know. I also found an end crystal, and it said it was a cooling thing. I didn't understand what it was, but I felt like it was all linked to the Nether portal. It was time to leave. It was a new area that I hadn't explored yet, so it was time to explore. And on the way back, I came across what looked like an abandoned island. Like the rest of the world, there wasn't much left. Just some food, which I took, and it was time to head off home. I arrived back in what I'd like to call home on day 76. I don't know if it was just the placebo effect, but the zombies again looked bigger than normal. Like over the days they had adapted to the environment, they'd grown in size, and it wasn't nice to think of, but there was no time to waste. After returning home on day 76, and now it being the start of 77, from a trip that really just went wrong, it was time to get back to my original task at hand. I set myself a goal of what seemed like a lifetime ago, to expand and also to create a home for myself here. The zombies beneath me were expanding, becoming more and more and also stronger by the minute, so this took a lot of work. It wasn't as simple as the first time I decided to expand the compound. With the zombies becoming more frequent and also attacking more frequent, and having to clear not only a lot of land, but some of the original work I had done, this proved a very hard task. I also spent the days planning out the tasks in front of me, including an actual front entrance with a brand new full trap, more room for expansion, that wasn't just for me, but for whoever needed it along the way. With the framework of the extension completed on the start of day 81, I decided the best port of call here was to make another zombie grinder. I know, for the third time on this adventure. This time, however, it would also make the compound much safer, and the results really would just show for themselves. It took a while to really get the logistics of this sorted. It was proving much more difficult with a wider space than something in like a 2x2 area that was nice and confined. But this would actually make every process much easier along the way. I filled it with water so the zombies couldn't escape, and I used a load of signs to direct the flow of the water. That way they'd fall into like a small 1x1 hole that I created. It was absolutely genius. I realized after some much needed time at the compound that I hadn't really spent any time exploring the surrounding area. The last I can remember looking at through the mountains was day 9, and that felt like a lifetime ago. It took a while to remember the world around me used to inhabit more people than myself, meaning that the systems and the buildings that were made for the entire population, they were still there, and that's when I found the dam. It was beaten, it was bruised, and it was falling apart by the time I managed to set eyes on it. There was a worry at the back of my head during the time I spent exploring and killing the mobs of the abandoned monument that it would break and flood. It had the ocean right next to it, and with my home being at a lower altitude than most, I really just had to hope and pray that it was still going to be operational. I was heading home on day 86 and the world felt peaceful. It was a feeling that I hadn't really felt since before this series had even started. And as we were now coming to the end of it, the zombies, the creatures of the night, they were decaying. It had come full circle, really. There were much fewer numbers than usual, and a thought came to mind on my long journey home. Was this the end? Much like when Thanos retired to his farm, I did the same coming into day 96. Nothing had happened in the 10 days that I was away. The world, to a degree, was becoming back to normal. The zombies had retreated during the day. The world outside was warmer, brighter. Everything seemed okay again. That was until I headed outside. I found a chest outside with a book and quill, similar to that of nearly 80 days ago. A part of me didn't want to read this. It wanted to stay with the life I had now, but to be dragged back in, I couldn't help myself. It told me to head to where it began. So I collected my items that I had hung up in the 10 days of retirement and decided to go back to where we had started. We started this series 97 days ago with the first line of actions, they do have consequences. It's a line that, looking back, I think accurately describes what happened here. I headed back with spirits high to my former home. Maybe it was someone I knew, someone from a past life, but to a degree I was right. People don't forgive easily, especially in a world where there are no rules. By the time I had even read the book that was left for me in my former home, I was already swarmed. An alarm was ringing citywide that someone had set off manually, which was drawing everything in the shadows towards me. I fought to the best of my ability, but everywhere I turned I was trapped. You see, the premise of the story here is that actions, they do have consequences. And taking lives, especially those 40 days ago, and those of the innocent, it leads to a revenge story which isn't my own.